So maybe I'll come visit. We'll see. Anyway, I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, Southeast Vermont, very cool. My kids have always wanted to go to Maine, and I mean, I know it's beautiful, but they've really fixated on Maine. It's a place that they talk about all the time. So who knows? Maybe we can go up and go to Maine, hit Vermont, see New Hampshire, do a couple of things at once. That'd be a lot of fun. You never know. We'll see what we can work out. Yeah, good call, Amy. Cold swimming in Maine is right. So my wife grew up in Massachusetts and went to Cape Cod, for summer for swimming and that sort of thing. And then when she was in high school, I think, moved down to Virginia, where we live now. And she went into Nags Head off the coast of North Carolina and went swimming for the first time and literally said, wait, water can be this warm? This doesn't make any sense to me. She loves telling that story. She said it was a real shock, pun sort of intended, that had no idea that you could swim in the ocean or anywhere like that and have the water be so warm. So yeah, cold swimming in Maine is right. All right, we're starting to fill up here a little bit. I'll wait a couple more minutes. And then we'll get rolling. I'm James Golder, everyone. Feel free to introduce yourself in chat and let us know where you're from, and we'll get a chance to greet each other. Thanks to everyone for popping in. This is great. I have Amy in Vermont too. My goodness. Couple of Vermont people today. It's exciting. Let's see. Just turn off all my notifications. Oh, hey, Don. Hilton Head. I was just down there. Well, it's been a few months now. Let's see. I was in Myrtle Beach for one conference, and then I was in Hilton Head for a different conference, but it was the same week. It's the end of February, beginning of March. Really difficult job that I have, going to Myrtle Beach and Hilton Head in February and March. It was really hard, but someone has to do it. I sacrificed. Anna from south of Seattle, very cool. Kevin, Essex, nice. Thanks, Jeb. Someone has to do it, like I said. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get rolling? Wow, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Very nice. Very cool. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get rolling, but continue to introduce yourself over chat. That's wonderful. Hi, everyone. I'm James Golder. I'm the partnerships manager here at Bloomerang. So my job is to work with our national accounts. And we look at national accounts as having some sort of national presence like Habitat for Humanity, but then having local affiliates, branches, chapters, whatever that term might be, very much like you all. And as I said before I knew that we were live, Habitat is genuinely one of my favorite national accounts to work with. I love the mission that you all provide. I really love how you weave volunteers in and rely so heavily on that community engagement. I think that's incredibly valuable and a real service, a real credit to the work that you all do. So I'm excited to talk with you today about turning volunteers into donors and really vice versa. So we're going to talk about a lot of overlap between those two categories and what we can do to encourage movement and not just leave them siloed. So we're going to talk a lot about that as we go. We will be sending slides out at the end. So everyone who is registered will get that email. So there are a couple of QR codes in here. Don't feel like you have to, grab the QR code right away. We'll send the slides out. You can access all that later. Strongly encourage you to ask questions as we go. If you'd rather wait, then we can certainly address them at the end of the talk as well. So whatever you're most comfortable with. I do a pretty decent job of noticing that there are questions and then kind of finding a natural place to pause and address those at that point. So I'll do the best that I can with that. Okay, so talking about volunteers and donors. Here's one of those QR codes I was mentioning just a second ago. We surveyed over 1,000 nonprofit professionals and really asked them how they were feeling about the state of the world as it pertains to fundraising, and found some really interesting results. So if you get a chance, like I said, we'll send the slides out, grab the QR code there and download that. Gotten a really a lot of good feedback about how helpful that has been to understand how many more people are focusing on major gifts, for instance, and so on. So lots of really interesting things to read about there if you get the chance. So a few key takeaways that we're going to talk about as we go today. One of them is that donors are down. We're going to look at the Fundraising Effectiveness Project and look at the data that came out of that this year, and a couple of things that really kind of have us raising our eyebrows and hoping to be able to work with our users and really just the nonprofit field in general to figure out how we're going to replace some of those donors who apparently are going elsewhere. The good news is that we do have an existing pool of replacements and volunteers. We just have to figure out how to tap into them. So we're going to talk about that, talk about how to do that through segmentation. And then at the end, we're going to wrap up by talking about the importance of retaining your donors and retaining your volunteers and give you some really concrete steps that you can take towards both of those. Excuse me. So I mentioned the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. Let me give you a real quick background as to what that is and what that looks like. FEP is a group of database providers. So Bloomerang, Razor's Edge, Donor Perfect, Neon, Little Green Light. There are others that I'm just not remembering right now. It's a group of database providers that allow their data that they hold to be anonymously sent to AFP. And then the FEP is kind of a committee sort of AFP, and they take a look at all of that anonymous data. And from that data, they extrapolate a lot of information, such as what we're looking at here. How many donors were there? How many donations were there? How many new donors? How many donors were retained? So on and so forth. So they look at all kinds of stuff. And then a few times a year, they release quarterly analysis. And then once a year, usually right around the big AFP Icon conference, they release a whole lot of data for the previous year. So they aggregate all of it and then throw it out there. So what we're looking at here is some information about the last couple of years. So the big one there is in the upper right there. The donor universe appears to be shrinking. And if we think back for the last couple of years, we've had this crazy pandemic going on, right? And especially in 2020, and really that bled over into 2021 too. The whole world was weird. I don't know how else to put it. It was just weird. We weren't holding events, and then we tried virtual events, and then we kind of tried hybrid, and then we went back to virtual, and then we are doing live now. I mean, it's been all over the map as we're trying to navigate everything and figure out how all of that's going to work. And so without those events, we saw a drop in the donor universe, I think. I think that's why we saw such a substantial drop there from 2020 to 2021. However, as you notice, we saw a doubling of that drop from 2021 to 2022, which, to be really honest, is a bit concerning. So if we think back to 2022, we were moving towards going back in person for events. We might not have been there completely yet. Maybe we were still doing hybrid. Maybe some people were doing completely in person. So, but we were moving in that direction anyway. And the fact that we still saw such a large percentage drop of the number of overall donors means that probably at this point, something else is going on. The prevailing theory seems to be that when I've talked with a lot of the consultants and the experts out there, a lot of people think that we're getting to the point where a lot of our donors are aging out. So as that continues to happen, and believe me, we're going to monitor it very closely for this year, for 2023. We'll see what that data looks like in a year. But if that continues to happen, we're going to really need to focus on donor acquisition moving forward. So where are these donors going to come from? The good news is that as the world gets back to normal more and more, and we're able to hold in-person events, we can go back to those events that had been so successful. And there's no reason to think that they won't be successful moving forward for the most part, as we continue to hold golf tournaments and auctions and galas and all kinds of other things. That's a really easy, not easy, that's a really a good way to pull in a lot of new donors and introduce them to our cause and our mission and show them what a difference they can make. So I think as we're able to hold those events, hopefully we'll see those numbers stabilize. If they continue to drop precipitously, then I do think we're at the point where donors are aging out and we do have a big problem. So we need to think about how we're going to replace them. We were the further good news is the next line down. We were able to keep the donations essentially flat. So that's good news. That means with the absence of some of those donors, though, that probably means that we went to the well a lot with our major donors. So that's generally the takeaway that people have gotten from that. And I think that's borne out by the line below, the new donors. So as you see, those new donors have dropped a lot in the last couple of years, which makes sense because without having events, without those donor acquisition events, where else are the new donors going to come from? The fact that we've seen a drop in the overall donors, we've seen a huge drop in the new donors, but the donation has stayed the same. That tells me that we really are going to the well with our major donors. We're relying on them a great deal. We've been bold in asking for help, especially in such a weird time. Those major donors have stepped up. They've made it happen. They've made it work. All of that is fantastic. But I have to imagine I can't be the only person who's at least slightly concerned about donor fatigue. So looking at these numbers really cements in for me that we need to find those new donors. We need to continue to do the events, especially as things get back to normal. Let's continue to do that. But there are probably some other things that we can do as well to pull some of those new donors in. And that's really what we're going to talk about. So some more statistics to kind of back all that up. You see the micro donors, the small donors, those were down. Both of those were down. The mid-level and the major donors were pretty much flat for the most part between 2021 and 2022. So that, again, backs up the idea that without events, we lost a lot of those micro and small donors, which I think is what we see there. Looking back over the last few years, we are seeing, as I mentioned, that this is a bit of a trend at this point. Donors are down. Dollars are fairly even. Went up a little bit in 2021, then stayed flat in 2022. Bad news there is with all of the inflation with, eggs and gas and all the fun things that we talked about over the last 18 months or so, that we're not accounting for that inflation. So we would really like to see those overall dollars rise as well. So hopefully that'll happen next year. Retention, that has me a little bit concerned too. Never like to see retention drop ever. I think donor retention is an area that we can focus on and we can really make an impact with. So the fact that it's dropping, and it has been dropping, a little bit of a worrying sign for me as well. So a couple of takeaways from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, looking in at those statistics. Talked through all of this already. We relied heavily on the large major donors. They came through. That's fantastic. But because we didn't have those small and new donors, we really probably don't have a great pipeline right now. So if you think about what you have that you're working on developing, that you've got maybe a small donor, but you think that they're capable of more than that, we're going to think about slowly moving them, or even not so slowly moving them up the ladder until they become a major donor if they have that capacity. I'm guessing you may not have as many of those as you would like to have. That seems to be a trend throughout the United States at this point. And that's backed up by the third point there, that those small, infrequent, and new donors were left behind, which really does mean that the pipeline is going to suffer as we go. So curious here, and you can, if you know how to raise your hand in Zoom, then please do that. And if not, it's fine. Wondering how many of you already work with volunteers, and given that you're all habitats, I have to assume it's 100%. That's such an important, strong part of what you all do. But you know, if not, certainly understand. If you are working with volunteers, then you already understand that they really are already donors. They're donating their time, which we've all agreed as a society is more valuable than money anyway. Oh, Ty is the volunteer coordinator. So I take that as a yes, that you are working with volunteers. That's awesome. Very cool. When I started putting this presentation together a couple of months ago, one of the questions that I had that I didn't want to just base it on my own personal experience. I know why I have volunteered in the past and why I continue to volunteer with some of the organizations that I work with, but I was curious to find out if there were any surveys or studies or anything like that that would explain why people volunteer. And I found a couple of interesting things. This is from Western Connecticut State University. There's a couple of slides here that they go through, and they list out some of the reasons why people volunteer. I can tell you that this slide is one of my favorite reasons that people volunteer. And anecdotally, this is one of the reasons why I volunteer. So I sit on the board of a small farm near where we live in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. And in addition to volunteer work on the board, I go and volunteer on the farm in the evenings sometimes and do all kinds of stuff. So, you know, we go and we weed the vegetable beds. We move hay around. We, you know, all kinds of farm activities, some of which are, you know, very easy to do, and it's pretty, you know, strenuous physical labor. So reducing stress and makes you healthier, absolutely. And then we get to enjoy the fresh vegetables at the end of the night, which is always fantastic. So that's certainly a big part of it for a lot of people. You also have people who are really interested in strengthening their community. So if you have people who are supporting youth, supporting families, working with their schools, anything like that. As the husband of a public school teacher, I have a great affinity for people who volunteer with their schools to help, you know, tutor the kids or anything like that. It's incredibly important. But the work that you all are doing, supporting families, is incredibly important as well. So a lot of opportunities for people to volunteer. It just kind of depends on what speaks to them and what they consider to be most important. You also have volunteers who are wanting to give back, and maybe people are not in the position to be able to contribute financially, or maybe they already contribute financially and they want to do something above and beyond that. Either way, when they are helping their neighbors, when they're making an impact in the very area that they live in, that's a good feeling. And that really will cement in with them the value of what they're able to do. So what you see here is there are benefits for the volunteer, but then they're also doing it because they want to benefit people around them, which is a pretty wonderful idea. And then I think this is the last one, encouraging civic responsibility as well. So the idea that if you can get people out to interact and help other people in their community, they'll get a better understanding of what's going on in their community, and they'll get a better understanding of the people who are in the community. And habitats, of course, are a great example of that. When you all have the corporate volunteer days and that sort of thing, that's such a wonderful way for people to dive in and get a better understanding of what's going on, as well as the people who are in their community all around them. So this kind of sums up all four of those previous slides from that study. The idea here is that they want to impact their community, and they see your organization as one of the best ways to do that. So they like what you're doing and they want to support you. They see that you are making a difference in your community and they want to keep that going. And that's probably pretty similar with your donors, right? Your donors want to impact their community. They want to help their neighbors. They want to reach out and make a difference in their neighborhood, in their city, in their town, wherever it is that they live. So they are supporting you financially because they see you as a great way to accomplish that. And I think the volunteers do as well. So again, a lot of overlap between those two groups, as we'll see as we keep talking. So when I looked at all of that, the next question that came into my mind was, okay, well, that makes sense. That dovetails, or that corresponds with why I volunteer. So why do people stop volunteering then? What makes them say, nope, not going to do that anymore. I'm going to ignore that email that was sent out, or I'm just not going to reach out and touch base with Ty, the volunteer coordinator, and let them know that I'm ready to do that again. A couple of different slides here, and there's a through line that we'll talk about as we go. This one is always a little bit heartbreaking for me. University of Maryland did a study last year and found that the nonprofit leaders, so your volunteer coordinators, your development directors, your executive directors, your leadership, understand and greatly appreciate the power and the impact that volunteers are having, but maybe not the funders, maybe not the people who are giving out the grants, your donors, other people who are providing funding maybe don't fully understand or appreciate, or both, the impact that those volunteers are having. So I think that's a really important area that we can work on, is when we're sending in our progress report to grants, or when we're having conversations with major donors, we should try to include some little tidbits about the great impact and the wonderful things that our volunteers are doing, and how we wouldn't be able to do everything that we're doing without them. If everyone involved is feeling the love when it comes to volunteers, and they're feeling how wonderful the work is and all of that, then the volunteers will feel that as well. And if the volunteers feel that, they're going to want to keep volunteering. Excuse me. So in addition, Urban Institute did a study a while ago, almost 20 years ago now. And essentially what this big block of text is boiled down to is that volunteers felt like they weren't necessarily being managed all that well. So if you have folks who are volunteering, they're taking time off work, presumably, or taking time away from their families, or both, they want to know that they're going to get in there, that they're going to be able to make an impact and make a difference in that 2 hours, 8 hours, whatever time frame they've devoted to volunteering for you. They want to know that, yeah, I'm going to be able to make a difference. It's going to be tangible. I'm going to be able to look at the end of that shift and see that we've made really good progress on something. And with habitats, that's really good news, because it should be, hopefully, most times it should be pretty easy to point and say, well, that house didn't have the windows in before today, and now we do. Or look at all the interior doors, look at the paint that is up now that wasn't there before. Hopefully you all can point to those tangible things and show them how they were able to make an impact. If they're not being managed well, if they're kind of left on their own, and all right, well, maybe you can go work over there. Go talk to Jeff. He'll tell you what to do. Go talk to Jeff. And then Jeff doesn't really have much of an idea and just kind of pawns them off on someone else. If that sort of thing is happening, your volunteers aren't going to feel very appreciated, and they're not going to want to continue to volunteer. They really want to know that they're making an impact. They want to be able to see that impact. And so if they're not making an impact, they're going to know it, and they're probably not going to come back. And then lastly, this one makes me a little crazy, just because my dad worked for the federal government for 30 years and talked all the time about bureaucracy and how they value things and how ridiculous some of their measurements were. And I think this fits right in with that, with those rantings I used to listen to as a kid. So the idea here is that the government estimates that one volunteer hour is worth $29. So pretty straightforward. You have to put a dollar value on it for all sorts of different reasons. I understand that. I get it. But I think when we reduce an hour of volunteering to a dollar amount like that, we're doing a great disservice to the people who donated that hour. their impact is well beyond $29, whatever that means. That may be what their hour is worth, but their impact goes well beyond that. If someone spends 5 hours working on one of your homes and they get a new paint job in that the owners are really excited about, and they put some interior doors up and they're able to really move things along for those 5 hours, the impact to that family specifically is a lot more than $150 or so. And so those are the stories that we need to be telling, not just reducing their hours to this $29 figure. We need to make sure that we're sharing the impact of those volunteer hours, not just that kind of arbitrary dollar amount that's attached to them. So just to sum up a few different things there, these are the reasons why people stop volunteering. They're all easily addressable, though, in my opinion. I think we can have those conversations with funders. I think we can manage volunteers effectively. And I think that we can help volunteers really understand the impact that they're having. We need to almost paint that picture with them when they're done volunteering. Phone call, email, take them out to coffee, interact with them somehow, paint that picture for them so they get a better understanding of it. And really, I think that's good practice for the number one thing on this list, having those conversations with funders as well. So if you're explaining to volunteers, hey, here's the impact that you have. We couldn't do this without you. This is amazing. Look at all of these pictures of this new house. It's awesome. This family is so excited. You can kind of workshop some of those ideas and some of those sentiments. And then when you go talk to the funders, you'll have a really nice way of talking to them and explaining to them how valuable the volunteers are and the kind of impact that they're having. So those things really should work hand in hand. So at Bloomerang, we are obsessed with donor retention. Obsessed is, I don't know, let's say passionate. We're passionate about donor retention. We love donor retention. We love for the organizations that use us to have their donors continue to use us year after year after year. We really want to make sure that those donors keep coming back. So I started thinking about what are the similarities there? So we just talked about why volunteers start volunteering, and why do they continue volunteering? Why do they stop volunteering? So why do donors stop giving? So if we think for just a second about what happens when someone jumps on your website, puts their credit card number in and hits submit, or when someone attends one of your events and they feel emotionally connected and they decide, yeah, I'm during the paddle raise, I will raise my hand. Let's do it. I'm going to give you a donation. They're feeling some sort of an emotional connection with you. At that point, they understand to a certain extent your mission, what you're accomplishing, what kind of an impact you're having. They get it. They also feel emotionally connected. They feel like, yeah, this is really good. I want to be a part of this. I want to help support this. I want to give some money to continue this mission going. So what changed? How did they get from feeling good about things to not giving that next gift? What happened? So Adrian Sargent is a well-known name in the area of philanthropy. He has been at the Lilly School of Philanthropy in Indianapolis for years. And he did a survey a while back, and I've seen different surveys since then, and they all say something similar here. Essentially, we've highlighted the things that you can do something about, that you can impact, and that you can change. If someone can't afford to donate any longer, not a lot that you can do about that. But I think with the 5 highlighted line items there, they can really be summed up into the one on the right, the one that says poor service or communication. So if you look at all of these, I think that's what you can boil it down to. When a donor is trusting you with their money, they want to know what's happening. They want to know what impact, what difference they are making. So they are saying, hey, I really like what you're doing. I want to support it. I want to give you $50, $50,000, whatever, or somewhere in between. I want to give you some of the money that I have earned, that I worked hard for. I want to give to you because I want to continue to do the good work that you're doing. I want to be on your team. That's a good way to think about it. I want to be on your team. So if we're all on the same team, and we're moving towards ending homelessness. We want to try to put everyone in a house. We need to communicate with those donors the little steps and the big steps and everything in between that's happening as we move towards that goal. So what are some of the wins that we have? Where do we need help? What are some volunteering opportunities? Is there a chance to maybe take a tour? We want to communicate with those donors and let them know about the impact that their gift is having and continues to have moving forward, because that's going to empower them. That's going to make them feel like, oh, okay, I'm still a part of this team. Cool. We're all on the same team. We're still moving towards that goal. You know what? Maybe I'm going to donate again. So communication through newsletters and phone calls and all kinds of stuff is incredibly important when it comes to donors and keeping them involved. The flip side of that coin, why do donors keep giving? It really can be boiled down, in my opinion, to the last one there, number 7. Who is being helped? So I realize that there are privacy concerns for folks. It may not be appropriate to share names and pictures and, all of that contact information. Totally get that. No worries. Do what you can. If you can anonymize things, if you can use a first name, not a last name, however whatever you all feel comfortable with, and guidance from the national office and so on, go with that. But tell those stories. Even if you have to completely anonymize things, tell those stories. The donors and the volunteers, as we're seeing, they both want to know who is being helped and how they're being helped. So we need to do a good job of sharing those stories with them, because that's going to cause both of those groups to keep coming back. They're going to keep volunteering and they're going to keep donating. So we need to keep them in the loop and let them know what's going on, and make sure that we do so really purposefully. So how do we retain those volunteers? We've talked about that a little bit. How do we convert them into donors? That's what we're gonna keep looking at here. So who are your volunteers? There were a couple of studies that have been done over the years. I pulled these statistics from all sorts of different places, but there's some really interesting things here. So in the middle on the top, 40% of donors were volunteers before making their first donation. So they were donating their time. They really liked your organization. They liked what you were all about. And then someone said, hey, do you maybe want to contribute financially too? And they said, yeah. So hopefully that conveys that you do have this pool of potential donors that are waiting for you to approach them and have that conversation. Everyone loves the one on the far right there. 10 times volunteers donate an average of 10 times more money than non-volunteers, and I think that just makes sense. So volunteers have seen what you're doing. They're on the front lines with you. They're out there hammering those nails and using the saws and everything else that your teams are doing on a daily basis. And they also get a chance then to see the families that you all are serving and that you all are helping. So they're seeing the work that they're doing and the impact that that's having with those families. That's gonna more than likely cause them to want to keep volunteering. And then when they start to donate, keep donating and donate at a higher amount than people who maybe haven't volunteered. That statistic is really eye-opening. A lot of people look at that and they say, wow, that's amazing. But I think once you start to kind of sit down and think about it, it really makes a lot of sense. So the other one at the bottom there in the middle, I think is very telling as well. Every nonprofit that I've spoken with relies, at least to some extent, on volunteers. So habitats are super volunteer driven. That's a big part of what you all do. There are, of course, nonprofits that have volunteers, but maybe not to the extent that you all do. But most, if not all, nonprofits do work with volunteers. But if 80% of those nonprofits are not engaging with their volunteers properly, that's something that we really need to work on. So engaging certainly can mean, is there a good scheduling mechanism in place? Is it easy for someone to say, hey, I want to come out and volunteer next Tuesday at 10 a.m.? Is that process easy for them? Is it easy for them to sign up and get, situated and placed and all of that? But it also means what happens after the volunteer activity is done. So are we reaching out to them? Are we continuing to communicate to them? Are we saying, hey, couple months ago, you all came in and you got the house started. So the Smith family was looking for a home. You all got that started. You did the foundations, you did a little bit of the framing. Look where we are now. We're almost done. The windows are in, the doors are in, we've fresh paint on the walls. Everything looks fantastic. Just got a few things to finish up. You all got it started. We couldn't have gotten this far without you. So those are the kinds of messages that we can continue to send to those volunteers that they want to hear and they want to know about. They're emotionally invested in that family and in that project, and we really want to make sure that we continue to update them with what's going on. So a couple of demographic information from an AmeriCorps study last year. I always like to point out on the right there in the middle, Gen X has the highest participation volunteering rate of any of the generations there. Gen X finally recognized for something, overlooked always, but we're good at volunteering. So I will absolutely take that. That's for those of you who aren't Gen X, I'm sure you're all rolling your eyes right now. But for those of you who are Gen X, you get it. You totally understand me. You'll also notice there with the education degrees that the higher educational attainment, the more likely it is that they're going to be volunteering. And the reason that I think that is important is it doesn't always correspond, of course, but generally people with advanced degrees tend to have capacity for slightly higher gifts. So the higher up that educational ladder you go, the greater the likelihood it is that someone might be able to be a major donor at some point. So the fact that we have a high percentage of people with graduate degrees and bachelor's degrees, that's a great indicator that we have people who are potentially ready and willing to donate. So we talk a lot at Bloomerang about segmentation. And for those of you who are in development, you probably think about a lot of these segments a lot. Your first-time donors, your lapsed donors, long-term donors, all of these are groups, hopefully, that you're thinking about. If you're a Bloomerang user, you're running those reports in the system that are so easy, and maybe sending out some emails to some of these groups and inviting them to a different event or something like that. That's fantastic if you're able to do that. My favorite segment, and really this just dovetails in with everything that we're talking about, is number 4 there. If you've got volunteers, if you've got the ability in your database or in your spreadsheets or whatever you're using, if you've got the ability to pull out those volunteers and look only at them, and then pull out the ones who have never donated, or maybe they haven't donated in 5 years or more, that's a really interesting segment that we should probably pay attention to. We want to try to engage with those folks, maybe invite them back to a volunteer activity, invite them to an upcoming event, have them come in and take a tour, do something to start that conversation from the development point of view so that we can engage with them further and then figure out over time, are they better as a monthly donor? Are they better as a major donor? Figure out, what they're interested in. Is there a certain program? Is there, a certain part of town that they really want to devote some resources towards? So have those conversations and start figuring out where they're going to fit in that puzzle. That's a really nice segment. If you all have the capability to pull that segment out in your database, I would strongly urge you to take a look at that. Start having some of those conversations with them. If it's a long list, that's good. Start with an email. If it's a short list, start with a phone call. Jump on a call with them, take them out to coffee, something like that, and just sit down and talk with them for a little bit and have a conversation and record those notes in your database. And then you can follow up with them and pick out some different things that they might be interested in working with you on funding. So I mentioned a second ago that when possible, think about screening your volunteers for capacity. So in Bloomerang, it looks like this. I don't know what you all use, but you've got this generosity index here. And this is telling us that this person, Jay Love, the founder of Bloomerang, has multiple $5,000 gifts in his giving history. So Jay would be a really good major donor candidate. So we want to kind of separate these volunteers who have never donated into a couple of different groups if we can. We want to keep those major donor candidates in their own group. We're gonna really want to go a little hands-on with them, take them out to lunch, chat with them over Zoom, whatever it works for everybody. But those are really gonna want more of a personal connection. Whereas Jim Gordon down here is cool. So he doesn't have any gifts that are that big. None of his are $5,000 or up. If I'm remembering right, his max out at about $1,000, something like that. So this would be a really good opportunity to engage with James here on a monthly giving campaign. So if you've been thinking, yeah, we'd like to get our monthly giving campaign up and running, that's a really good idea. This is a great way to start doing that. Segment out your volunteers. Again, I don't know what your database looks like or how that works or anything like that, but in Bloomerang, you can run a report showing all of our volunteers and then showing the volunteers who are on fire up here and the volunteers who are cool down here, along with a couple of different levels, and then send an email to the people who are cool and say, hey, for $25 a month, this is what you can accomplish. For $50 a month, this is the impact that you're going to have, and so on. So give them a few options. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how quickly some of them jump on board and say, yeah, this is great. They maybe can't afford a $5,000 gift. Maybe they can't even afford a $1,000 gift to write that check right then and there, but they could certainly do $100 a month. And even if they can only do $25 a month, that's fantastic. That's recurring revenue that's going to come in every single month. And they're going to feel connected and empowered and part of that team, especially when you continue to follow up with them after those gifts are made. So if, again, not sure what you all are using. If you're using Bloomerang, though, this is what it would look like. We can walk you through how to run those reports and all of that. Nice, easy way to get your recurring donation up and running. So yeah, I like the middle line here. Either way, we need to move them through better storytelling. So whether we're talking about those major donor possibilities or the small recurring gift, we need to make sure that we're telling the impact, we're explaining what's happening, and that we're telling those stories. They want to know who they're helping and how those people are being helped. And if we can provide them with those stories, then we're gonna be in a really good shape when it comes to making sure that these people keep coming back, both to volunteer and to donate. So that begs, how do we tell these stories? Right? So we talk a lot at Bloomerang about telling donor stories, telling stories that are going to drive emotion, that'll drive empathy, that'll really connect with your audience and get them to continue to come back and donate, get them to continue to come back and volunteer, or even volunteer and or donate for the first time, depending on where they are and things. That led us to develop this slide a couple of years ago, and it's one of my favorites. And I hope that you all will pardon me for a second. I'm gonna spend a second and brag on my oldest daughter, who I'm super proud of course. Larissa lives in Chicago and just graduated from DePaul and loves to read. So I'm going to tie this into this slide in just a second. Be patient. I'll get there. Larissa loves to read more than anything. She's always been a really voracious reader. And for those of you who know Goodreads, you can track how many books you read in the course of a year. So we each have our own Goodreads profile, and we have a competition between the two of us to see who can read the most books during a year. She always wins. She's won as long as we've had those profiles. Last year, I thought I was going to get her. I read about 130 books, and I thought, you know what, this is the year I might overtake her. But no, she was at 150 or something. I don't know. She has so much time on the subway that she's able to make that work. But anyway, with all of this reading that we both do, we send book recommendations back and forth to each other. So we talk a lot about hey, I really think you would enjoy this. Here's the link, and so on. And what I found is interesting is I don't recommend all the books that I read, and she definitely doesn't recommend all the books that she reads. It really takes sort of an exceptional book for either of us to say, hey, this is good, you should read this. And so I started thinking about that. What was it that was driving that decision to share that book with Larissa versus the previous 10 books, which I enjoyed and they were fun to read, but I didn't feel like I needed to share that with her. And I really think it boils down to number one on this slide, to character. So every book that I can remember reading has some sort of conflict. In a romance book, they get together and then they break up, and are they going to get back together, or is it going to be a Ross and Rachel thing, or what's going on? If it's a spy book, there's some sort of conflict with a foreign power or whatever. Always has some sort of conflict that in turn engenders some sort of goal. So someone's going to have the goal of getting back together with that person, or defeating the superpower, or whatever the goal is, and that leads to some sort of change over time. So numbers 2, 3, and 4 are sort of baked in with the books that I read anyway. You certainly may be different, but the books that I read has those components in it. But the truly excellent books that Larissa and I send back and forth to each other have that first one in there too. Really compelling characters. And I think we've probably all read an article or a book or a story or whatever where the characters are really flat and not memorable at all. We've certainly all seen movies like that where you just don't care about the character. You can tell sometimes that you're supposed to be emotionally invested in someone's death in a TV show or something, and you just don't care that much because they haven't really done a good job of fleshing that character out and connecting with you through some sort of story or conflict or whatever. The character is just kind of flat. So all of that to say that the more you can flesh those characters out in the stories that you tell to your volunteers and your donors, the more connected those volunteers and donors are going to feel, both to you and to your mission, but also to the people that they're helping. And therefore, the harder it's going to be for those volunteers and donors to turn away and to stop helping them, whether it's monetarily or through the time that they're donating. So the more that you can, again, privacy concerns, totally understand that, but the more of those stories you can tell and the more background information that you can give on those families and the children who are struggling because they don't have a place to study and their grades are slipping and they need a new home, because that's really going to solidify that foundation for them, and it's going to give them a place to hang out with their friends, and they're going to be a lot happier. And all of those wonderful stories that you all hear about every single day, the more that you can share those and flesh those characters out a little bit, I think the more successful you're going to be at keeping those donors and the volunteers coming back. So when you're able to do that, please do continue to double down on storytelling as much as you possibly can, because it's going to make an enormous difference as you're sending donors to be volunteers and volunteers to be donors. So I did a thank you study, I guess you would say. I donated to 25 habitats. No, I'm sorry. I donated to 50 habitats. One in every state. I donated $25 back in January or February, and then tracked the results. So I wanted to see, as you see here, I did it with Boys and Girls Clubs too, but I wanted to see what kind of thank you letters I got. I wanted to see, did I get any phone calls to thank me for my gift? Was I put on, like a newsletter list? How did people engage with me after that initial donation? And I threw up a couple of examples of some really nice jobs that people did. You see the 2 letters from the Habitat there. What you'll notice with both of those that I really, really love is the little handwritten notes. So the rest of it was probably done in a database, right? You drop a picture in there and then you can mail merge and it'll spit the letters out and everything looks fantastic. But then the development director, the ED, someone took time to write a quick message. And if you look at both of those messages, they didn't take a lot of time, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, couldn't be any longer than that. But that's incredibly impactful. My eye is immediately drawn to both of those as I look at those letters, and it makes me feel like there's a little bit more of a connection there. So think about your thank yous when you're sending out emails or hard copy. There are different things that you can do, especially with pictures that are engaging, with text that tells a little bit of a story, and so on, so that you can really hopefully connect even more with those donors and with those volunteers, because it will make a difference as they consider whether or not they're going to donate again. So, Ty, I love that. Ty says they rewrite every 4 to 6 weeks along with a photo collage. Love that. Handwritten note as well. Wonderful. And then a second thank you from a board member with a handwritten card. We're going to talk more about board members in a little bit. And I loved all of that. That is fantastic, Ty. Thank you for sharing that. That is couldn't be more spot on. I love that. So, oh, another chat. Let's see. Oh, nice smiley face. Cool, cool, cool. So I have a love-hate relationship with this slide. A lot of times people, first of all, it's hard to read because it's so small. I certainly understand that. But the idea here is that when you're segmenting your communications, you don't need to build everything from scratch. So we looked on the previous screen at some examples of some really cool thank yous with some nice pictures and handwritten notes and all of that. When you're segmenting your thank yous, or really any communication with your donors and your volunteers, a lot of times people get really stressed out and they say, okay, well, if I look at volunteers who have never donated and I want to send them a letter, but I want to segment out by capacity, like we looked at a little while ago, that's a lot of work to create multiple letters from scratch and then figure out how to mail merge and all that stuff. And the point of this slide is to say, don't overthink all of that. You can accomplish a lot by segmenting those different groups, having a lot of the text and the body of the email or the letter be the same, but just tweaking a couple of things and personalizing and customizing those things. So if you look closely at these, you'll see that there are a couple of different links that are in there. A little bit of the text is the same, or a little different, forgive me. But by and large, these three segments are fairly similar. So again, don't have to start over from scratch. You can have a lot of it be really similar and then just alter a few things here and there. That's a perfectly acceptable way to do things. So, oh yeah, good call. Yep. So this here, this is talking about incorporating videos as well, which is a trend that we've seen recently. When you have those in-person events, when you're leading up to that, you can employ the use of videos, which is fantastic. Really good way to engage with people as well. So that's a good reminder there. And the other point with this series of slides is to get different voices involved. So a lot of times organizations keep using the development director or the executive director or whomever, and just keep going back to that person time and time and time again. The more different voices you all can involve, the more your donors and your volunteers are really going to appreciate that. You'll get thankful people who want to hear slightly different voices there. So one of the last slides here, again, another love-hate relationship with this one. When someone volunteers with you for the first time, or when they donate with you for the first time, we like to suggest that you have a communication cadence lined up, right? So this would be a series of follow-up activities that you're going to put into place to thank that donor or that volunteer, and also inform them about other things that are happening and invite them to other things that you'd like them to participate in. And a lot of organizations look at this cadence, they look at this slide and they say, okay, I am doing 2 of these things right now, and I do not have enough time to add 8 more things or whatever that number is. To which I say, yep, totally understand. I know you all wear a lot of different hats. In addition to development and volunteers, you're responsible for all kinds of other things. So pick a couple of things and add those into that cadence. Don't feel like you need to do all of this. Maybe pick 1 thing, maybe 2 things, add those in over the next couple of months. If you get to the point where you've added that in, you feel good about things, add something else in if you want to. But our purpose of doing all of this is not to overwhelm you and make you do a whole lot of extra work. It's just to say that here are some options, here are some different things that you could add in, because this is going to allow you to connect with those volunteers and those donors and really make sure that they don't drift away, make sure that they feel like they're informed, they're seeing the impact that their gift and their time is having, and that's going to make sure that they keep coming back. So if you're able to sprinkle some of those in, please do. And real quick, actually, you know what? I'll go back to that slide. Let me make a pitch for phone calls. Especially when someone donates or volunteers for the first time, if you have the ability to make phone calls, research has shown that really, really good things happen. So phone calls don't have to be from you. I would love to suggest and recommend that you get your board involved. I can tell you as someone who sits on a board that they're going to be overjoyed that you ask them. They're going to rush over to make those phone calls. No, I'm totally kidding. They're going to whine and they're going to say, no, they don't want to, and all of that. But if you can get them to do it, they're probably going to enjoy it. They'll get a chance to hear about the organization that they clearly care about so much from kind of a different perspective. You know, as a board member, you get tuned in to day-to-day budgeting and staffing and all of that stuff. And the chance to hear about what a great time this new volunteer had when they went out to the work site and they got a chance for the first time to hang a new window and they met the family that they're helping and they're so nice. And, hearing all of that stuff from a brand new volunteer can actually be really rewarding and refreshing for your board members. So you might have to drag them into it a little bit, but it's a good idea if you can do it. Good things happen with the whether or not the donor or the volunteer will come back. Good things happen with the donor's second gift coming faster and the donor's second gift being a lot larger. So phone calls have multi-level impact. So if you're able to weave those in, I would strongly recommend that you take a look at that. So as I said before, we're going to have the ability, we'll send you these slides. You all can take a look at the QR code here. And I think we have a poll as well, as you all are thinking about what questions you have for me. Yeah, webinar poll here. So if you all would like more information about Bloomerang, please click on that information there and let us know how we can help you. So as you all are doing that and interacting with the poll there, we've got 5 minutes left or so. Would love to answer any questions that you have. If you want to put them up there in the chat, would love to walk through whatever questions you all have. Man, I must have done a fantastic job. That's what I'm going to go with. No questions. All right. Well, looks like we're getting some good responses on the poll. That's fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Oh, thank you, Amy. That's so kind. I'm glad that this was really helpful. I'm really, really happy about that. I will tell you all, you have my email address sitting up on the screen right now. And again, we'll send you the slides too, so you'll get it then. Feel free to send me questions anytime. I'm happy to look at your website and help you evaluate your online donation situation, what that looks like. I've done that for plenty of organizations. I'm also happy to look at your volunteering section and see if it's, how easy is it for someone to raise their hand and say, yeah, I want to volunteer. So feel free to shoot me an email anytime. I'm happy to chat with you over email, happy to jump on a phone call, happy to visit your website and provide some feedback. So, whatever would be most helpful, more than happy to do any of that. All right. Well, it is Friday afternoon, 4 o'clock where I am. You all are my last calendar item of the day. And believe it or not, I'm going on vacation tomorrow. So our 2 youngest kids, my wife and I, are going to go to Toronto and Montreal, Quebec, and then Ottawa, and then come home. So I'll be gone for the next couple of days. So I was able to focus somewhat on this webinar today. Hopefully it was helpful for everyone, but I can feel my vacation brain starting to kick in here pretty quickly. So I think it's a pretty good time to wrap things up. If you need anything, please feel free to shoot me an email anytime. Those of you who indicated that you wanted a little more information about some different things, we will reach back out to you and get in touch with you and certainly get all that scheduled. So hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And I hope that this was helpful. We will talk with you soon. Thanks, everybody.